Alright, hello everybody. Today we're just going to be going over some of the changes to Shadow in 7.1.5. Now, the first thing I would like to say is don't be closed-minded at all about these changes. Shadow has some pretty significant problems, whether you want to admit it or not. So any change is a good change at this point. While Shadow is doing a lot of damage, the actual gameplay is fundamentally broken. So don't be one of these people who goes, "Oh no, Shadow is rip. Fucking can't do anything about. I'm not gonna play. I'm not gonna unsub. They're changing my spec." Well, unsub because you probably shouldn't be playing the game anyway. Don't freak out about the changes. Changes for Shadow are very welcomed. So, dash over really quick. Auspicious Spirit, Insanity nerf. Void Form, Lingering Insanity is now a talent and not baseline. Buff to Mania, buff to Masochism, Shadow Crash damage buff, Surrender to Madness nerf to 100%. Void Ray just has got Mind Seer is not a thing anymore, so Void Ray is only affecting Mind Flay now. So Shadow Word Pain has got a damage nerf to it, but its insanity is increased. Mind Blast has its insanity increased. Mind Flay has had its insanity generation increased by 50%. Shadow Word Death has had a insanity increase. Vampiric Touch an insanity increase. Void Bolt now, rather than refreshing the duration, extends the duration. And Void Eruption now only puts a 1.5 second cooldown on Void Bolt. So, from all these changes, the big thing is the Insanity Generation buff. Now, this is because of the removal of Lingering Insanity. So, now while you won't be getting back into Insanity, as quick, well, debatably as quick, they've made up for that by buffing your Insanity generation. In turn, this buffs the duration you can stay in Void form. In turn, this increases the strength of Surrender to Madness, and that's why Surrender to Madness has been nerfed again. So don't worry about the numbers so much now. Surrender to Madness still is basically working the same way it was. But the big changes to Shadow Priest is how your Void Bolt interacts with your dots and how Mind Flay now interacts with your dots. So Shadow has gotten a big thing that it has never had, and that is Cleave, and it's gotten a fair bit of it too. Oh, lovely. So the Shadow Priest Cleave now is, while it still has a ramp up, is going to be rather good. Now, obviously, we saw a very minor nerf to Shadow Word Pain, not really a big deal. We did see a buff to Shadow Crash. So the Cleave at the moment is apply your 2 dots, either the one target and then Mind Flay to AoE all your Shadow Word Pain damage to everybody around you. So for about, I'd probably say, I'm guessing at this point at about 5 targets is where you want to be. Not casting Vampiric Touches, and you just want to be Mind Flaying on top of a Shadow Word Pain. So as you can see, if we apply Shadow Word Pain to the target now, and we Mind Flay, the Shadow Word Pain is going to be hitting all these targets when it ticks on this primary target. Now, obviously the damage, because this is lower level dummies, it's doing quite a bit of damage. But, so that there, just allows you as a priest to just be essentially spreading Shadow Word Pain just through mind flaying. So if you're mind flaying constantly, you're going to be essentially doing the same damage of this Shadow Word Pain. So in a AoE pack for Shadow, you're looking to just apply dots to everything. And keep in mind that the insanity generated by your dots is a lot higher, so you're not punished as much for casting dots. You're entering Void Eruption, and then when you cast a Void Bolt, you're going to be refreshing the duration of all your dots on all the targets. Now, so not refreshing, extending the duration. Now, while this is not, the extending the duration is not as potent as it was, with one Void Bolt cast, you are essentially, extending the duration of 3 dots because it extends everything near it. Now, it's hard to say whether this is a buff or a nerf to the class. It essentially just makes it a lot easier, but that's not really a big factor in the Shadow Priest gameplay. So right now, you're punished a lot less for multi-dotting, which is a good thing, really. You don't want to be punished for applying, for dotting. Dotting needs to be something that is efficient to do. And as we saw, with Serenity Madness, you get to high stacks of Serenity Madness, and you can't even cast your dots because they don't generate enough insanity. So the insanity generation to the 2 changes are good. Your AoE rotation that has changed gives you now choices between what you want to cast, whether you want to just be cleaving with Shadow Word Pain, whether you want to be applying Vampiric Touching and multi-dotting, and then extending that with Void Bolt. And that also lets you play into things like, it might mean that Auspicious Spirits isn't as good as it once was, or Shadowy Insight now might actually be really good because your Mind Blast now generates 18 insanity. So we do get some other changes, so it might be rather good. Ideally what we want to see coming out of these changes to Shadow Priest is you getting some flexibility in your talents. So with the buffs to the insanity generated by Mind Flay and Mind Blast, we might see Fortress of the Mind actually getting some play rather than Twist of Fate. Now we're only seeing Twist of Fate getting played. It does have some exceptionally high uptime if there's adds on some bosses, but the only reason Twist of Fate really is it's taken for the be-all and end-all of everything is because of Serenity Madness, how backloaded Serenity Madness is for your damage. So obviously 20% increased damage during that is pretty big. So with the buffs to these other talents, single target, you might see Fortress of the Mind actually coming ahead. That's the way it used to be, Fortress of the Mind and Void Ray single target. And that's, a single target talent choice, is a good change, freeing up some talents. We might also see Shadow Word Void getting some play, just because if you want to be doing an AoE rotation, you really want to be trying to be Void Bolting as much as you can and having the highest insanity uptime as you can. So Shadow Word Void, it's hard to say. It might be a spell that you just cast outside of insanity to get back into insanity really quickly. That could be something that you want to do. If you have 4 targets all with dots, and you want to be keeping them up constantly, well, you can be, drop out of insanity, get straight back into insanity, and then just keep Void Bolting constantly, and extending your dots. That's something that could be taken. It is kind of a weird talent. We haven't really seen much of it played, so it might be, hopefully with the changes, with Lingering Insanity removed, getting back into Void form easily is something that might actually be very valuable to the Priest spec. So far, tier 15, we might actually have some choice. Tier 30, obviously buffs to Mania, so that might be okay, especially in Serenity Madness. Extra run speed, cool. The utility talents are great. So level 60, obviously, Lingering Insanity is now a talent. Now, this also, same sort of deal. You might want to be getting back into Insanity very quickly, which is exactly what Lingering Insanity does. So you might see, for, again, the multi-dotting, Lingering Insanity is the way to go. You might, Serenity Madness, Reaper of Souls might be the way to go, and Pure Single Target, Void Ray might be the way to go. All these talents are very unique and have a different kind of playstyle to them, so, they all might be viable for different sort of things. So it's pretty hard to tell, just from looking at it without extensively playing the spec, what the best talents will be for DPS. And I don't think anyone knows that at the moment. Obviously, there are some people who have played it a lot more than I have, but I've been sitting in Dungeon Queue for quite a while, and it hasn't procced yet. So I'm just kind of going off some theory crafting here, and we're just taking a look at, what's going to be the best. But, Lingering. I think this is a lot better of a talent change. The actual remove of Lingering Insanity into a talent, I reckon it's pretty good for this spec. So, it's a much better addition than Void Lord. So the level 75 now. Obviously, the Sand Lane. This doesn't generate you insanity, and that's the core problem of it. I would love to see this have some ticking insanity component to it or something. The only reason this talent doesn't get chosen is just because it doesn't generate insanity, and that is quite a big deal. So I don't think it'll really ever be chosen, but we'll have to see what happens. And then obviously Auspicious Spirits has been nerfed, but Shadowy Insight has actually been buffed because of how much more insanity Mind Blast generates. The other thing is that if you're running Fortress of the Mind and you have the Legendary Belt, Shadowy Insight can actually be really good. So, you might find that Shadowy Insight is now just the way to go. And that's actually, a welcome change to having some choice. You have a Legendary, you can choose a different talent. You're taking Fortress of the Mind, you can complement it with a different talent. These choices, these combos, this is what, a spec needs and should have. So, just these little changes is kind of what can, mix up a spec completely and completely change how it's being played. The level 90 talents are fine. Mindmender still is... The problem with Mindmender is that it's a global cooldown and it doesn't generate insanity instantly. So when you want to be using it at, where you have a high decay rate, using that global and not generating insanity instantly can be a problem. So that's why you see a lot of people taking Power Infusion rather than Mindmender, but Mindmender is still good damage-wise. And then Shadow Crash obviously has been buffed fairly significantly, so, AoE, you might see Shadow Crash having a place. You got to remember that you can use this while in Insanity, so it's it gets an extra 20% damage buff over what it currently is, so it will do a fairly significant amount of damage. The one thing, though, I would have to say about Shadow is that we haven't really seen any changes to the level 100 talents. Now, I've heard, it's not confirmed, there hasn't been too much playtesting around it, but Surrender to Madness is apparently still the best DPS talent, which is fine. All the changes so far have been geared towards, letting you change the rest of your talents and making sure Shadow Priest has choices in what it wants to do. So, it has choices in how to AoE, it has choices in how to single target, it has choices in how to cleave, and multi-dot. So, all the changes have been geared towards how, different choices about how you want to play your spec. So, I haven't played Surrender to Madness too much in the PTR yet, but it's still good. The increase in Mind Flay generation really makes up for the decrease in Surrender to Madness that you're losing. It's still a good talent to take, and it still should be the talent to take for clear fights. If you want to be doing what we have now, Auspicious Spirits, Reaper of Souls, max your global cooldowns kind of thing, go that spec, and that's what you're going to be doing for cleave. That should be a viable choice for a Shadow Priest to do, and they should be very backloaded on how much damage they're doing. But there needs to be a complement to that, and that should be Legacy of the Void. Now, Legacy of the Void, it's kind of in a weird spot. So because of how much more insanity you're now generating, a Legacy of the Void in turn is kind of nerfed by that, because you are out of insanity less. But then the removal of lingering insanity directly helps Legacy of the Void, so it's pretty hard to tell where this talent is kind of sitting at the moment. But I would have to say the biggest kind of paradigm shift towards Legacy of the Void is the fact that your Void Bolt now does not refresh the duration of Shadow Word Pain and Vampiric Touch. So, because Shadow Word Pain and Vampiric Touch, they do generate insanity, but it's not a lot of insanity. So, ideally, you want to try and be casting them as the least amount of times possible, and Legacy of the Void is going to allow you to do that. So, Hopefully we can see Legacy of the Void maybe, you know, being in your standard 6 to 10 minute fight or whatever it is. Strona to Madness is for a purely execute or cleave fight. And, you know, hopefully we can see something change to Mindspike yet. Mindspike is actually still broken. So we'll have to see what they do about Mindspike. I still expect some changes to come to Mindspike. But if we just want to take a look at how the actual single target rotation is playing out currently, if I take... I'm always a fan of Mindmender. It wasn't the best one to take, but I always like Mindmender more than Power Infusion when playing in the beta. We might also go with some Shadowy Insight just because it's been buffed, some Fortress of the Mind, and Void Ray. So, I mean, to me, that as talent set up like this, I don't have the Legendary Belt, so Shadowy Insight, you do lose some uptime with it. But, you know, hopefully, right, if everything's kind of balanced properly, that this might actually be your single target playstyle. Maybe not actually, sorry, with Shadow of the Void. So, just because you're taking Void Ray, you want to be casting Mind Flay as much as possible, so you want to be trying to get as many global cooldowns into Mind Flay rather than having resets on Mind Blast. So, you know, there might be Lingering Insanity might actually be better than if you're taking Shadowy Insight, you might want to take Lingering Insanity or Reaper of Souls. Whereas if you're taking Void Ray, you might want to be taking Auspicious Spirits. Now, that there, just exactly what I did there, is kind of is what is perfect for a class, is combos with your talents to min-max what you're doing in certain situations. Now, that is exactly what you want to be doing. So it's actually really good to see some of these changes to Shadow. I'm just hoping that it's actually balanced to a point where you do have these choices and it's not just dominated by this one talent. So if we look at the single target right now, obviously apply dots, we can chuck up our Mindbender straight away, straight into, you can see how quickly we're getting into Insanity there. And then obviously the Void Bolt is only refreshing the duration there. Now, the problem I still have with Shadow is that your artifact ability still hits like a wet noodle. If we, how much is Mind Flay ticking for? I think it's about 90k crits there. If we have a look, what's the white damage on it? So it's 150k over 2.3 seconds, right? Whereas Void Torrent is 500k over 4 seconds. So, the actual damage of Void Torrent is not that significant. So it's kind of a problem. That's not something I like to see. I would love to see it do a much more significant amount of damage. Get it back to where it used to be, whereas a single target DPS increase. So obviously it scales with haste very well, because you can see the damage of it there ramping up because it's scaling with haste. So a buff to Void Torrent would be really great. But that's just my opinion. I think Void Torrent, because it's a purely single target ability with a cooldown, and it is your artifact ability, it should be something that is very impactful and not really just used to drain, to stop your insanity drain. Which is kind of a sad spot to see, but from the rotation there, you can kind of just see your dots will be falling off. You do lose a lot of the time on your dots, and you will have to start recasting them. So it is a different rotation. Well, it's not a different rotation, but it's just kind of like a slightly different playstyle. Now, do I think this is enough for Shadow currently? I mean, yeah, it's changes, it's good. Have they broken Shadow? Absolutely not. Stop bitching, stop moaning, play it, try it out. If you don't like it, try something else. Boo-hoo. It's fundamentally the same spec. fundamentally everything is exactly the same. They've just changed like how Void Bolt works. The playstyle is really exactly the same. So you know, the extra choices to Shadow is good. Let's hope the damage numbers are there. Let's hope it still is a very good multi-dotting class, and it should be. You know, you don't get punished as much for casting dots, so you know we might see Shadow still, you know, on top for fights like, you know, Scenarios or whatever, where they multi-dot and, you know, go straight into madness and become king. So it's not all bad for Shadow. You know, there's the changes give us some choices, and hopefully, you know, we can see Shadow become more into, you know, a balanced spec. You know, it's a good way to go about it. So, hope you enjoyed. I hope you liked the insight into the Shadow changes. Leave any comments below and what you thought. Thanks for watching.